Good morning, gentlemen. Today we are going to do a repeat of the poem My Mother at 66. Okay? Because it is very essential for students to get into the depth of the poem. And simply by providing you with audio clips is not enough. So I thought I might as well sort of give you a direct message across to you, and for that to happen, I have now done a little video. So please pay attention. Okay, gentlemen, let me first of all read out this particular poem to you. Listen very carefully. I hope you have your text in front of you, and as I read out, please follow the lines along with me. My mother at 66. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me. Dozed, open-mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away and looked out of the young trees, sprinting, the merry children spilling out of the homes. But after the airport's security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, worn, pale as a winter's moon, and felt that old, familiar ache, my childhood's fear. But all I said was, "See you, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. Now, you have all listened to my recitation of the poem. If you look at the poem carefully, you will notice it's one single line, punctuated with semicolons, comma, and in the end, of course, a full stop. Here, what the poet is trying to say to us, what is she trying to imply? Taking her mother as a subject matter, the poet makes a comment on aging and human mortality. We know right from the very start, she is on her way to Cochin. And who is there beside her? Her co-passenger, her mother, of course. And as they were traveling, in due course of time, she happens to look towards her mother. And what does she see? Her mother is sleeping, dozing, sleeping with her mouth open. Her face was pale, like that of ash. Ashen means pale. She almost resembled a corpse, a dead body. The very sight of this causes her immense pain, causes her to look out of the window in order to distract her mind from her pain. What is that pain? Oh, my mother is getting old, and soon she's going to die. Naturally, not a single one of us wish to, lose our loved ones, especially when it comes to parents. But we all know that death is an integral part of life. We have got to accept it. But here you have to remember one thing. When the poet looks at her mother for the first time, she gets a shock of her life. She's unable to digest the truth that her mother is mortal, that she's going to die. And what does she do? As an immediate reflex action, she looks outside the car, the goings on outside the car. And what does she see? The trees sprinting past her car, merry children. Now you see how cleverly the poet vividly brings into play two contrasting elements. One inside the car, The atmosphere inside the car is one of sadness, gloom, old age, and mortality. Whereas the scene outside the car is one of vibrancy, youth, eternal life, spontaneity. So there's a kind of a contrast. Okay? Why does she bring that contrast? Because inwardly, she wants her mother to go on living forever. She's unable to accept the fact that death is an integral part of life. Okay? And her childhood fear, because this particular fear of losing her mother was always with her. It was there right from the time when she was a little girl. Oh, what will happen? What will happen to me if my mother should suddenly die? And now again, after so many years, the same fear has come back to haunt her. Then what happens? Another dramatic element is introduced towards the end of the poem. They have reached the airport. The mother has gone through the basic routine affair of getting her, the poet has gone through the routine affair of having her luggage checked. Then she goes through the security check. After the security check, she takes a second glance at the mother. And this time, she draws a comparison between the pale winter's moon, okay, and the mother. The mother is as pale as the winter's moon. Wan means pale, dim, bereft of light. It's a very apt comparison. The moon is on her last leg of life. The mother is also on the last leg of her life. Soon, both of them are going to disappear. Okay? But this time around, what happens? There is a certain change that comes over her. She suddenly realizes that death and separation is part of life. Death is an integral part of life. And one must do well to accept it. And she eventually accepts that fact, no matter how bitter it might be. Hence, this acceptance fills her up with a new zest for life. She smiles at the mother in the hope. She's saying to herself, my mother is still alive. She is not yet dead. So why spoil the party? As long as she is alive, let both of us make the most of it. Let's have our life full of fun and frolic instead of, lamenting over the so-called inevitable death. And ultimately, they bid each other, the poet bids her mother goodbye in the hope of meeting her again. So one thing that you have to understand here is, the poem at the beginning begins on a note of despair. But towards the end, it ends on a note of optimism and hope. Okay? Now basically, in order for you to understand the poem clearly, there are certain points that you have to keep in mind. Okay? I have written down a few points for your benefit. You do well if you copy them out into your notebooks. For instance, just take a look at the board over here. The main points. The first point, poet traveling to Cochin airport with her mother in a car. Second, looks at the worn, pale face of her dozing mother. Dozing, sleeping. The old fear of losing her mother returns. The childhood fear returns. Oh, what's going to happen to my mother? What's going to happen to me if she dies? Sprinting trees and merry children provide a contrast. Contrast between the scene inside the car and that outside it. Next we have, after security check, the old familiar ache returns, meaning the mother looks at her, I beg your pardon, the poet looks at the mother the second time around. But the familiar ache returns to her. But here, the difference is she comes to accept death as an integral part of life. She becomes reconciled with the fact that death is an integral part of life. There's no point in whining about it. One might as well enjoy one's life at the time that one has got on one's hands. Okay? And with that in mind, point number 7, she bids goodbye to her mother and hopes to see her again. As I said, the poem, it begins on a note of despair but ends in a note of optimism. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.